Hey guys, tonight we find ourselves in a town where the fog has a memory. The ground keeps secrets, and even the candles seem to flicker with hesitation. You've just arrived. Maybe by accident, maybe not. It's just past midnight, and as your boots sink into a puddle of mud that smells faintly of iron and something older, you spot it. The cemetery gate. Iron arched, crooked at the top like it's been sighing under some great weight for centuries. Mist pours out through the bars like breath from a sleeping animal, and you suddenly wish you'd come during daylight, if that even makes a difference here. You feel eyes on you, but the town is silent. Homes nearby look occupied, but show no movement. No light. A lantern swings gently above the gate, though there's no breeze. That's when you notice something odd. The gate has no hinges on this side. It was never meant to open outward. You look down at your watch, but the hands are spinning, ticking out seconds faster than your pulse. So before you get comfortable, take a moment to like the video and subscribe, but only if you genuinely enjoy what I do here. And hey, drop your location and local time in the comments. I want to know where in the world you're listening from. Now dim the lights, maybe turn on a fan for that soft background hum, and let's ease into tonight's journey together. You make your way along the edge of the cemetery wall. The stones are warm to the touch, which is strange. There's frost on the grass. You're not imagining that. You see the frost. You feel the warmth. Both things can be true here, unfortunately. The ground dips slightly near the rear corner, where the wall seems to vanish into a small patch of trees. Locals refer to this area simply as the gap. They never clarify what it's a gap between. That first night you hear things bells softly. No source. No tower in sight. A whisper of something being dragged, and you swear someone is watching just over the lip of the hill, but the moment you look, it's just a willow tree bowing low. Here's your first unwritten rule: don't go through the gate. Not at night, not ever. People don't explain why. They just act like everyone already knows. This town, founded sometime in the 1700s, never officially recorded the cemetery's origin. Most towns would mark it in church logs or county records. But here all anyone admits is that it was already there. A strange phrase, especially since the church that now stands beside it wasn't built until 30 years later. So how did the cemetery get ahead of the church? Historians still argue whether the cemetery began as a plague burial site or something far older, possibly a pagan mound reused during the settlement. No one's quite sure, and no one's brave enough to dig deep and find out. One oddity that does survive in documentation: the early settlers wrote down every birth, death, and livestock sale, but not a single funeral. It's like they buried their dead and then erased them. You'd think that kind of mystery would attract tourists, ghost hunters, YouTubers braver than me. But the town has no hotel, no gas station. People who drive through often report engine failure, like the air itself is too thick for combustion. Quirky, huh? Oh, and here's a fun tidbit. Local folklore claims that birds don't fly over the cemetery. You scoff until you notice it's actually true. During daylight, birds loop widely around it. Even the pigeons. You spend your first night in the town's only boarding house, a creaky two-story structure that smells faintly of lavender and damp wool. The owner, a small woman with one blind eye, doesn't ask for your name. She just says, "You're here for the rules, aren't you?" and disappears into a room with no lights. You don't sleep well. There's a groaning noise that rises just before 3 a.m., like the sound of wood slowly splitting. You check the hall, but no one else stirs. A moment later, you hear bells again. 13 of them. Soft, like someone gently tapping spoons together. The next morning, you walk the town square and notice something else. No one talks about the cemetery. Not directly. They speak in sideways phrases past the iron near the fog bank west of the silence. You ask a grocer if there's a cemetery nearby, and she says, "Wouldn't know. I don't walk that direction anymore. Not since the frost came back." She's standing next to a pile of fresh apples, by the way, in July, with frost on them. Mainstream fact. The town's meteorological records are a complete mess. Temperatures fluctuate wildly, Augusts with hailstorms, Decembers where bees swarm. It's so notorious that in 1974, a university even tried to study the area's microclimate. The research was abandoned when 3 grad students left without publishing. One reportedly now lives in the woods beyond the cemetery. Doesn't speak, just carves symbols into bark. As for you, you've stayed one night. You already want to leave. but something about the way the wind pushes your shadow ahead of you like it's leading you makes you stay. Just one more day, right? Just until the bells ring again. You wake up to the sound of your name. Only no one should know your name here. The voice is faint, more of a hum, really. But it lilts in just the right way to make you certain you heard it correctly. You open the window to check the street below. Empty. Morning fog curls at the corners of the cobblestones like spilled milk. Even the cats seem to be in hiding. As you step out into the day, it's eerily quiet, save for one thing, the lack of whistling. Not a soul is humming, singing, or making any musical sound. You realize it gradually, like noticing you've been holding your breath for too long. You pass a group of children skipping rope, but the rope hits the ground silently, no rhymes, no laughter. Just wide eyes that won't meet yours. Later, you bring it up to the baker, a red-faced man named Tomasz with forearms like flour sacks. No whistling after sundown, he says quickly, then goes rigid. Not even to yourself. You blink. Why? He glances at the candle burning beside the register, even though the sun is still out. Because they like the sound, and we'd rather not remind them we're still here. You try to laugh, expecting him to crack a smile. He doesn't. Turns out, this particular rule goes back generations. According to an old travel journal from the 1830s, one of the few surviving accounts of the town by an outsider, there were once a group of stonemasons who worked through the night rebuilding part of the cemetery wall. One of them began to whistle an old tune while chiseling. Minutes later, the fog rolled in early. The next morning, he was gone. His boots were found perched upright at the edge of an open grave. Here's your mainstream historical fact. Whistling at night has been taboo in numerous cultures from Japan to Eastern Europe. In Japan, for instance, it's believed to summon snakes or spirits. In some Slavic traditions, night whistling attracts demons. The town may be remote, but it's not unique in its superstition. What is unique is how seriously they take it. Even the dogs seem to avoid howling. The town's library, what's left of it, is housed in an old railway station long since unused. Most of the books are coated in a fine layer of what looks like dust, but smells like chamomile and something faintly metallic. You browse the local records section, such as it is, and find several entries blacked out with ink. Literally. Thick brush strokes over paragraphs. The whistling rule is mentioned 3 times, but never explained. And here's the fringe tidbit in one journal. A margin note in faded pencil reads, "No music at the threshold. It wakens the sleepers." Who the sleepers are is predictably never clarified. You decide to test the superstition. Just a quick note. Nothing dramatic. You step near the cemetery gate again, lean forward, and whistle a short, rising trill, the kind you'd use to call a dog. The moment the sound finishes, you feel something. The air tenses. No birds flee, no sudden thunderclap. But the silence becomes sharper, more expectant. And then you notice a figure standing inside the cemetery near a crooked headstone. You swear it wasn't there a second ago. It's not moving. It doesn't wave. It's just standing. Not looking at you yet, somehow aware you're watching. You back away. You don't run. You remember Tomasz's warning about reminding them you're here. You never whistle again. Later that evening, as the sun drops behind the chapel's bell tower, the rule reveals its second half. A woman in her 70s is hanging laundry in her garden just down the lane. She begins to hum a lullaby under her breath, distracted. The moment the sun dips below the horizon, every window on the street slams shut in unison. You hear a kettle shatter inside one house. The humming stops. When you step outside to see if she's okay, her yard is empty. The laundry still flaps on the line, the clothespins all facing the same way. But the basket is gone. So is she. You ask around. No one remembers a woman matching her description. You even check with the boarding house. No new guests, they say. No tenants missing. No notes left behind. Historians still argue whether the town ever officially had census records before 1950. The earliest reliable documentation was pieced together from school enrollment rosters, livestock registries, and chapel donation logs. The absence of names is an ongoing mystery in local academic circles. The prevailing theory: people either left no trace or had their names removed on purpose. That night, you light your own candle, set it by the window, and sit very still. You listen. Not for sounds, but for the absence of them. It's astonishing how loud silence can be when you've broken a rule even unintentionally. You don't sleep easily, but when you do drift off, it's not into dreams. It's into images. The figure by the headstone, the old woman's clothes still blowing in the wind, and faint, far-off whistling, not your own. The worst part, you wake up with the melody still in your head, and you don't remember ever having heard it before. The next morning, you're careful. You don't whistle. You don't hum. You barely breathe. You eat a piece of toast in absolute silence, your ears attuned to every groan of floorboard, every creak of pipe. Even the butter knife seems to make too much noise. You wonder, how can a town be afraid of its own dead? At breakfast, Tomasz quietly mentions something else. When they bury someone, he says they drive the nails inward. You blink. You mean into the coffin. He nods, but bent back toward the corpse, always and never in straight lines. You want to ask why. You want to laugh. Instead, you just chew your toast more slowly. Later, at the edge of the cemetery, yes, you're back there. Of course you are. You find a groundskeeper, or something like one. He's crouched beside a grave with a small iron hammer, tapping gently at the corner of a wooden board sticking out of the soil. You call out to him, but he doesn't answer. You step closer. He stops tapping, stands up, and without turning to you says, "If the nails point out, they find their way back." His voice sounds wrong, like it's coming from behind your head even though he's in front of you. You leave. Mainstream historical fact, many European cultures in the 16th and 17th centuries practiced unusual coffin sealing traditions. Iron nails, twisted wires, and even thorn branches were often included not just for structural purposes, but for spiritual containment. In Romanian villages, iron spikes were driven through corpses' hearts not because of vampirism exactly, but to prevent wandering souls. The logic wasn't always about the dead being evil, it was about the dead being unfinished. Back at the library, you find an old ledger of burial procedures dated vaguely to the 1800s. It's water-damaged and smells of camphor and mildew. The instructions are strange. Nail each corner, bend heads inward. Speak no names during hammering. 3 stones atop each grave, one to weigh, one to warn, one to remember. Some pages are torn out, others are stained dark brown. Let's hope that's rust. Here's the fringe tidbit. One page mentions iron that remembers. It's written like that casually, like everyone already understands what that means. You don't. That night, you finally talk to someone who seems willing to explain. Her name is Annetta. She runs the town's candle shop and has hands that look like they've never stopped trembling. She sits you down in the back room and pours you lukewarm tea from a cracked pot. The nails are invitations, she says, staring into her cup. Pointed inward, they let the spirit settle. It knows its place. But pointed out, she looks up. That's a challenge. You shift in your chair, a challenge to the living, to everyone. She tells you a story about a man named Carol who lived 3 generations back. He was a woodworker loved by the village. When he died, they buried him quickly during a thunderstorm. No one noticed that the coffin had been nailed shut incorrectly, nails driven flush and straight heads facing out. The next morning, his house caught fire. The day after that, the cemetery gate shattered outward. Iron warped like it had been gripped by huge hands. 3 villagers were found in their beds with splinters under their fingernails. Only they didn't own wooden furniture. Historians still argue whether this is just a local folktale warped over time or a distortion of an actual event. There was a major fire in the town records around 1891, though no official cause was listed. Some argue it started from lightning. Others think it was sabotage. No one mentions Carol. You visit the cemetery again before dusk. You notice the gravestones more carefully this time. Many are adorned with iron nails driven into the stone itself in chaotic, inward-leaning patterns. Bent, rustless, like they've resisted the weather, like they're clinging to something. You find one stone that lacks nails entirely. It's newer, dated only a decade ago. The name is partially worn away, but the date is clear. Underneath, there's a small bouquet of dried heather tied with red twine. You think about the man who may have hammered that coffin shut. Did he forget the rule or ignore it? You don't realize how long you've been standing there until you hear the faint clink of metal tapping wood. That same rhythm as before. Slow, precise. You turn. There's no one there. But the hammering doesn't stop. You run this time. You don't stop until you reach the edge of the town square, and even then you don't look back. You get the sense that looking would confirm something you're not ready to see. That night you dream of nails. Not just coffin nails, but nails in doors, nails in windows, nails in your own pockets. You wake up with one in your hand, small, bent, smooth, cold. You don't remember picking it up. You check your boots, no loose nails. You check the window, it's still latched. You place the nail on your bedside table, just one, and you leave it pointed inward. You wake with a tension in your spine like something followed you into sleep and forgot to leave. The nail is still on your bedside table exactly where you left it, but now there's a faint black smudge beneath it like ash or soot. You check your hands, clean. You check your pockets, empty. Still you feel like you've smuggled something out of a place you never truly entered. The town is quieter today, not just hushed watchful. The fog hasn't lifted even though it's nearing noon. It clings low tracing lines around buildings curling over doorsteps like it's memorizing the town's layout. You head toward the chapel hoping for some sense of grounding. Faith logic comforts something. But before you get there, you notice a building you hadn't seen before. It's small, covered in ivy, and sandwiched between two taller homes on the edge of the cemetery's eastern side. You only spot it because of a glint in the mist sunlight catching glass. You walk closer. It's a bell tower, or it used to be. The tower is crooked now, leaning like a snapped tooth, the bell chamber barely intact. A faded plaque reads, St. Imelda's Watch, decommissioned 1928. No entry door, just a rotting stairwell winding upward inside. The bell itself missing, or so you think until you hear it ring. Not loudly, not urgently, but enough to stop your heart for half a beat. You step back, scanning the top. No movement, no rope, nothing that should have made a sound. But the air feels different now, like something ancient just stirred beneath the floorboards of reality. Mainstream historical fact bell towers, especially in medieval Europe, weren't just for marking time or calling worshippers. They were spiritual sentinels designed to ward off evil with sound. In some villages, bells were rung during storms, plagues, even funerals to scare away spirits thought to linger nearby. The ringing was more than ceremony, it was protection, which makes what happens next even stranger. You talk to an older man mending shoes on the corner. He won't meet your eyes, but when you ask about the bell, he stiffens. That tower's been empty for years. But I heard it. He shakes his head. If you heard it, it wasn't meant for you. It was meant for someone already gone. He goes back to his stitching. That conversation is over. Later, you find yourself walking back toward the cemetery, something about the sound drawing you there. And as you do, the fog parts just enough for you to see them. Not people, not exactly. Figures. They move slowly, indistinct in the haze, robed and faceless like memories that forgot they weren't supposed to linger. They drift near the graves, never straying far. You count them. 8, then 9, then 11. Then one of them turns. No face, no features, just a shape tilting toward you with intent. Not aggression, not friendliness, just awareness. And then the bell tolls again. Clearer this time. A single note ringing out across the stillness. Your ears buzz, your teeth ache. It vibrates in your ribs like a tuning fork hit by a whisper. The figures vanish. Fringe tidbit. There's a local belief that the bell tower is still occupied. Not by priests or caretakers, but by something called the Watcher in the Chime. No one will say exactly what that is. But they speak of it as if it were sentient. Like the bell is its voice and its warning. You retreat again. You make that a habit here. Back at the boarding house, you try to sketch what you saw. You're not an artist, but the shapes feel burned into you. You can't draw faces, so you leave them blank. But the ink smudges anyway. Even the paper seems reluctant. That night, the bell rings again. You're sure of it. No dream, no illusion. A single tone at 3:12 a.m. sharp, and then another. But this time you hear footsteps in the hallway. Bare, soft, uneven. You grab the nail from the bedside table instinctively. You hold it like it means something. Like a key, or a blade. The footsteps stop outside your door, and then you hear something worse. A whisper. Not in your ear, but in your chest. A pressure behind your ribs, forming a word that isn't in any language you know. It feels wet, fungal, like the breath of a tunnel deep underground. You whisper back without thinking, no. Silence. Then the sound of retreating steps, but not down the hallway. Up! You didn't think there was an attic. Historians still argue whether the bell tower was ever completed. One record lists it as functional as of 1912. Another, from just a year later, calls it abandoned shell. Some suggest it was never finished at all, just a prop built to hide something else. A sound chamber, a listening post, a trap. You stare at the ceiling above your bed. You wait, but no more sounds come. Except at dawn, when the sun breaks the horizon, the bell tolls once more. 12 times. You close your eyes, counting with it. But your skin knows something your ears haven't caught yet, because this time it tolls a 13th, and the fog doesn't lift. You don't leave your room the next morning. Not right away. The air feels thick, like a coat you can't take off, woven from the weight of that 13th bell. Outside your window, the fog lingers unnaturally still. It doesn't curl or drift. It just sits heavy and unmoving, like it's waiting for something. You check the ceiling. No hatch, no visible attic door. But something about the plaster above your bed feels off now, discolored around the edges, slightly bowed like it's breathing. Eventually, you force yourself outside. You need to know if anyone else heard it. 13 chimes. Not 12. Not a mistake. But no one's talking. The town is quieter than ever. Shop signs remain flipped to closed. The baker doesn't open his shutters. The candle shop is dark. Even Tomasz is gone from his usual spot. Instead, you find something strange, a letter nailed to the chapel door. It's written in careful looping script. No salutation, no name. If the bell rings 13 times, it means something has walked that shouldn't. Leave before dusk. Do not answer knocks tonight, especially if they call your name. You stare at it. The nail holding it in place is iron bent inward. Mainstream historical fact: in parts of 18th century France and Italy, churches used to hang bell warning sheets, not unlike storm alerts. These warned townsfolk of curses, celestial events, or black mass activity. Most were burned after use. It was believed that keeping them too long brought bad luck or worse attention. You look around. No one seems to have seen the letter, or maybe they've all read it already. You walk back toward the cemetery wall, drawn by the silence more than anything. And there you see her again. Not the figure from before, someone else. A girl, maybe 12, standing just outside the fence, staring inward. She has one hand resting lightly on the iron bars and wears a red ribbon in her hair that doesn't quite flutter in the breeze. Because there is no breeze. You approach slowly. Hey, you okay? She doesn't look at you, but she speaks. They're not all dead. What? She presses her palm against the fence and turns her head a little. Some of them remember how to walk. They just forgot how to stop. You shiver. What's your name? She finally looks at you, and it's your own face. You blink, and she's gone. You step back so fast you nearly trip. Your own footprints on the road are the only proof you were even there. Fringe tidbit. The town's oldest superstition warns of mirror children figments or spirits that mimic the living to deliver warnings. These figures are never to be acknowledged, named, or followed. Local kids are taught from a young age. If you see yourself outside yourself, go inside. And stay. Back at the boarding house, the landlady finally speaks. Her voice is gravel with moss. You stayed too long, she says. Most leave by now. The bells don't usually toll for visitors. You ask her what happens if you don't leave. She sighs. Then you start to see them before they're born. It makes no sense, but nothing here has since you arrived. You try to plan an exit. Bus schedules, none. Taxi. The phone line crackles and dies when you speak your destination. You even consider walking, but every road out appears to circle back after a few miles. The town seems self-contained, not in the cozy way. In the maze that forgot how to end way. That night, you stay up. You place the nail in your pocket. You light the candle in the window. And you wait. At exactly midnight, you hear the knock. 3 sharp raps. Familiar rhythm. Like someone who's done it many times before. Then a voice, "Let me in. I forgot my name." You don't answer. You don't breathe. Another knock. "Let me in. I remember yours." You grab the nail. Another knock. Louder. Followed by a long scraping sound, as if fingers are being dragged across the wood. Then silence. You don't sleep. You don't blink. You just wait for the sun. Historians still argue whether this town's traditions stem from a single traumatic event. A mass burial, a cursed artifact, a broken spiritual pact, or if it was simply a community that believed so deeply in its own stories that they became reality. No one agrees, but no one denies the strangeness here either. Just before dawn, you check the hallway. Nothing. But outside your door, 3 more nails, bent inward, neatly placed, as if someone or something is helping you follow the rules. You pick them up, hold them in your hand like talismans, and that's when you hear it again. A single bell, but not from the tower. From under the floorboards, you freeze. Not from cold, but from a sensation far worse. That bell, soft and low, seemed to rise from the very spine of the building. Not overhead, not across town, beneath you. It echoes in your bones, vibrating through your souls like you've been standing on a speaker wired directly to the grave. You don't move at first. Your heart tries to convince you that maybe it was a pipe or an old floor joist groaning in the early morning chill. But your gut knows better. So does your skin. You get dressed, pocket the 4 bent nails, the original, and the 3 from your doorway, and step carefully into the hallway. It smells like wax and iron now. You didn't notice it before, but it's unmistakable. A scent like the inside of an old keyhole. The landlady is gone. Her room is open, the bed untouched. On the desk, a stack of yellowed index cards labeled Bells Knox Walker's names. You don't dare flip through them, but you do notice the top card has your name written in neat red ink. Underlined. 3 times. Outside, the fog has thickened. You can't see more than 20 feet in any direction. You try walking toward the square, but the layout has changed. A street that once led to the market now loops back toward the chapel. You turn around, take a different alley, and find yourself standing in front of the cemetery gate again. And that's when you see it. The groundskeeper. But this time he's not alone. 3 others stand beside him, each wearing funeral garb from different eras, Victorian, post-war, something almost medieval. They don't speak. They don't move. But they look at you. You can feel it even without seeing their eyes. Mainstream historical fact. Certain towns in Europe and South America employed professional mourners hired to weep, sing, or even perform ritual tasks during funerals. Some wore designated clothing never to be laundered or reused. Their job wasn't to mourn the dead so much as to distract or confuse spirits looking to follow the body back home. You wonder if these figures are something like that, but reversed. Not sent to follow the dead, but to watch the living. Fringe tidbit. In a centuries-old collection of funeral customs from Moravia, there's mention of the ones who attend from the other side. Figures who only appear when the border between grave and ground has blurred. They don't guide, they don't guard, they witness. And their presence is considered a countdown. You take a step back. The groundskeeper tilts his head just a hair, and the bell tolls again. This time it comes from within the cemetery. Loud, clear, not underground, not imagined. It bounces off the walls like a laugh that's lost its humor. You stumble away, find a bench you don't remember being there yesterday, and sit. You try to collect your thoughts. Something's changed. The rules aren't just about protection now. They're behaving more like instructions, like a recipe. You ask yourself, what do the nails do? Why are they bent inward? Why did the landlady leave them for you? You pull them out of your pocket and set them on the bench beside you. 4 nails, 4 knocks, 4 figures. Coincidence. No such thing in this town. Suddenly the fog shifts. A shape moves just beyond the iron gate. It's not one of the mourners. This figure is smaller. A child, maybe. Wearing the same red ribbon you saw yesterday. She waves, not in greeting, in warning. You stand up and the fog collapses inward like a stage curtain. When you blink, she's gone. The bench is gone. Even the square looks unfamiliar now. You've been shifted, not in space exactly, but in placement. Like a bookmark moved from one chapter to the next without your consent. You look down. The nails are back in your pocket. And there's a 5th. Historians still argue whether towns like this, isolated, rule-bound, unnaturally quiet, are holdovers from long-extinct religious sects, quarantine zones, from old plagues, or simply communities that rewrote their own reality to cope with something ancient. Each theory holds a sliver of truth, but none explain how the rules stay active, why they still work, or for whom. You head back to the boarding house. This time it takes 2 hours, even though it should have taken 10 minutes. The roads stretch and bend under your feet like taffy time folding oddly. You arrive just before dusk. You push open the door. Your room is clean. Too clean. The nail is gone from your bedside table. So is your bag. So is your reflection. You stare into the mirror. There's nothing there. Not your face, not the room, just darkness, depthless, waiting. You back away, breathing hard. From behind you, a voice you recognize. Your own. Don't forget to answer when they call. It's polite. You turn. No one, but a bell rings. And this time it doesn't stop. The bell doesn't stop. It keeps tolling slow and steady like a heartbeat that's just too strong, like it's pumping something thick and invisible into the veins of the town. You press your hands to your ears, but the sound doesn't dull. It isn't in the air anymore, it's inside you. You stagger down the stairs of the boarding house. The floorboards tremble beneath each ring like something is shifting beneath them, stretching upward. You don't wait to see what. You step out onto the street, and the town has changed. The fog isn't fog anymore. It's shadow. It swirls in tendrils along the rooftops, curls around doorknobs, paints dark curls onto the cobblestones like ink spilled on a map. And for the first time you realize there are no stars, no moon, just a velvet black sky, low and close and watching. The bell continues. You make your way without meaning back to the cemetery gate. It always leads here. Whether you turn left or right, walk uphill, or backtrack the road will curl you back to this place like a tongue curling inward. Only now the gate is open, wide open. The hinges, which you were told didn't exist on your side, gleam in the lantern light. The path inside is lined with lanterns too, each one flickering with a dull blue flame. And standing in the middle of the path is the girl in the red ribbon. Only now she's older, your age, wearing your face again. She doesn't wave. She gestures, one hand raised, palm out. Stop. But the bell says go. Mainstream historical fact. In some Eastern Orthodox traditions, bells are rung not just to call the faithful, but to guide souls across the threshold between life and death. Each toll carries intention, one for death, one for ascension, one for remembrance. But some churches had a forbidden 13th toll meant only for excommunication after death, a kind of spiritual eviction. Even the dead apparently could be rejected. And now it feels like that's what's happening here. You're being summoned, but not to stay, to belong. Fringe tidbit. A local myth tells of the turn bell, a sound that calls back the ones who were meant to leave. Not dead, not alive, just stuck. Half shadow. The bell, they say, tolls 13 times for them when one of the living starts to cross over. Not by dying, by belonging too deeply. You've crossed a line. Maybe it was the nail, maybe the mirror, maybe the child with your face. Whatever it was, the town has begun its acceptance and its rejection. You don't go into the cemetery. Instead, you circle it. You find at the rear fence a place where the ground dips and the wall has crumbled slightly. There's no gate, no lantern, no watchers, just wet earth and a patch of moss that smells faintly of cinnamon and rot. You step through. You expect the air to shift, for the temperature to drop, for your ears to ring. But instead, everything goes silent. No bell, no wind, just rows upon rows of headstones. Some cracked, some pristine, all facing the same way toward the chapel. None of them face east, not a single one. That's strange. Graves traditionally face east in Christian cemeteries, symbolizing resurrection. But not here. You walk carefully, eyes scanning names. Some are written in languages you don't recognize. Some are scratched out. Others are blank, the stones smooth like soap. And then you see it. A grave with no headstone, just a hole, fresh, waiting. You take one step back, and a light flickers to life behind you. You turn. It's not a lantern, it's a mirror, standing upright in the center of the graveyard. It shows the cemetery behind you, yes, but not you. Instead, it reflects the groundskeeper. But his eyes are hollow, his face blank, and in his hand, a nail, bent inward. You blink. The mirror is gone, and now so is the grave, covered as if it had never been opened. Historians still argue whether this cemetery is technically in use. The last documented burial is over 70 years old, yet the grounds are perfectly kept. Grass trimmed, flowers replaced, no tools ever seen. Some say the town employs a secret caretaker. Others say the cemetery takes care of itself. You leave unsure if you're still on your side of things. Back in the town, the bell is quiet now, but the candle in your window has gone out. And on your pillow, someone has left something. Not a note, not a nail. A single iron bell, small, cold, silent. But when you pick it up, it rings. Just once. Just for you. You don't drop the bell. You think about it, your instincts scream to throw it out the window, chuck it into the fog, and pretend none of this ever happened. But something about its weight keeps your hand still. It isn't heavy, but it feels significant. As if your skin remembers it, even though your mind does not. You turn it over slowly. No markings, no string. Just a loop at the top where one would be tied. Inside, the clapper is missing. So how did it ring? You set it down on the table. It rings again. You step back. The candle beside it flickers violently, though there's no breeze. You check the window. Still closed. You check the hallway. Still empty. And then faintly, as if from miles away, you hear something strange. Footsteps, marching, many of them. The rhythm is too exact to be random. It's a procession, steady, intentional, like a funeral parade with no instruments, only the dull thud of boots on packed earth. You glance outside, but the fog has grown so thick it looks like paint smeared across glass. The outside world has vanished, or you've been removed from it. The bell rings again. This time it rings in your bones. Mainstream historical fact in 17th century Bavaria. It was common to use small soul bells at the bedside of the dying. These were rung once a person's breathing stopped to guide the soul safely to the next world. But if the bell rang prematurely, it was believed to invite something else. Something that came before the soul was ready. You wonder which version you're holding now. The marching grows louder, closer. You still can't see them, but you can feel the vibration in the floorboards. Not just footsteps. It's heavier than that. Something dragging. Something bound in cloth. Something ceremonial. You step into the hallway, and you notice something new. The pictures on the wall, once quaint watercolors of countryside scenes, have changed. Now they all depict the cemetery, some at dusk, some at night. One shows a storm rolling in, and in each there's a small figure near the fence. Sometimes a child, sometimes a man in a black coat, sometimes just a shadow. The same figure, over and over, in different clothes, different poses, but always in the same spot, always watching. Fringe tidbit. In a hidden corner of the library, tucked into a water-damaged folio of local rituals, there's a page titled The Procession of the Remembered. It describes a yearly event where names are read aloud in reverse alphabetical order, each followed by a single bell toll. The reason to remind the dead they are no longer listed. But it warns, do not read your own name. You remember the landlady's index cards. Your name was written in red. You descend the stairs. Slowly, carefully. The marching is close now, right outside the boarding house. But when you reach the front door, there's only silence. And something on the porch. A bundle, wrapped in burlap and tied with red twine. You bring it inside and place it on the table next to the bell. The bundle smells faintly of earth iron and old wood. You open it. Inside, a candle stub burned almost to nothing, a small ledger, and a second bell, this one with a string but no clapper. The ledger is old, leather-bound, stiff with age. Inside, every page is filled with names, neatly listed, organized by date. But only first names, no surnames, and only some are crossed out. Near the bottom of the last page, your name, not crossed out. You flip ahead. The next page is blank, but the paper feels newer, as if it's waiting. You step away. Your breath fogs, though the room isn't cold. The bell rings again, only this time not from the bell on the table, from inside the walls. Historians still argue whether this town was founded by spiritualists, exiled monks, or something far older. Some point to architectural clues, certain angles in the chapel, certain symbols carved in gutters, the orientation of graves. Others believe the whole town is a living ritual, a protective circle, a containment zone. You don't know what to believe anymore. You light the candle stub. The flame sputters low and blue. It casts strange shadows. Your own doesn't seem to match your movements anymore. You stare at the two bells, the one that rang and the one that hasn't. You realize something. Only one of them is yours. But which? You hear another knock, gentler this time. Then a voice, your voice. Let me in. You left something behind. You don't move. The voice is your own exactly cadence tone. Even the faint rasp you picked up from the dry air since arriving. It's like hearing your soul try to imitate itself. You stare at the door, heart thudding like a second bell in your chest, and do the only thing that makes sense. You blow out the candle. Darkness presses in immediately, thick and total. The fog outside, the dim light inside, none of it matters now. Your room has been swallowed. The bell doesn't ring again, but something else does. A breath, not yours. It huffs softly against the keyhole. You reach for the ledger and run your finger down the list of names. Dozens, hundreds, each marked with the same little cross beside it until the final dozen or so. Those are untouched. Your name is still there, still waiting. Mainstream historical fact: in a small 19th century Bohemian town, grave registries were intentionally written by hand in pencil and never in ink. The idea was that souls weren't officially anchored until a year and a day had passed. Crossing a name out prematurely was said to invite hauntings not of the person named, but of the person who did the crossing. You think about that now. The ledger has no writing instrument nearby. You look around, no pencil, no pen, just the bells, just the nails, and one of the bells begins to tremble slightly. Not ring, just shake, like it's anticipating something. You move toward the door slowly, not to open it, but to listen again. The voice is gone, but something else has been left in its place. A whisper, whispered directly into your bones, not in language, just a feeling. Choose. You stagger back. Choose what? You look at the two bells again, one with a string, one without. One rang, the other hasn't. You think back to the graveyard, to the open grave, to the mirror, to the girl with your face, to the voice that whispered your name without asking. Fringe tidbit. Local legend speaks of a ritual called the twin toll. It's never written down, just whispered between families. If you find two bells, the rule is simple. One is meant for the world above, one for below. Ring the wrong one and you're claimed by whichever side you didn't choose. You have 5 nails in your pocket now. 5 rules broken, or 5 you still have left to obey. You lift the bell without the clapper. It's lighter than you expected, cold but not unpleasant, like metal stored underground. You hold it to your ear. Silence. You set it down, then pick up the other, the one that has rung, and it rings again without you moving. That decides it. You tie a bit of the red twine from the bundle onto the silent bell. If you're going to be haunted by choices, at least make them deliberate. You place the ringing bell into the fireplace grate and place one nail beside it bent inward. You don't know why, but it feels right, like a lock pairing with a key. You don't light a fire. You don't need to, because the bell starts to glow faintly, not burning, but warming. The room fills with a metallic scent, sweet and sour like blood and ozone. And the fog outside the window clears just enough to reveal something new. A figure, not moving, not waiting, just standing at the center of the cemetery, facing your window. Historians still argue whether certain ancient burial grounds were designed not to honor the dead, but to keep something else sealed inside. Some scholars believe the positioning of headstones, gates, and trees weren't random but intentional sigils drawn large across the earth. The cemetery here, it's a rune you've been living inside this whole time. You hold the second bell tightly. It's your choice now. You open the ledger one more time and stare at your name. Then you pick up a nail. The sharp end hovers just above the page. If you drive the point through your name, if you bend it inward, what will that mean? Freedom or invitation? The figure in the cemetery doesn't move, but your shadow does. It shifts, tilts, raises its hand, and waves. You don't wave back. You can't. Your body has gone completely still, frozen in the act of deciding. One hand holding the nail, the other gripping the bell. And across the fog-smeared window, your shadow, still attached to your feet but no longer obeying you, stands in place and greets the figure as if it were an old friend. Maybe it is. The ledger sits open on the table, your name gleaming faintly under the candle wax smudges. The page feels warmer than paper should. You place the tip of the nail just beside the last letter. Your hand shakes. The bell in your palm is trembling too, though it makes no sound. And then you hear something new. Not footsteps, not a bell. Pages turning. Not in your room. Above you, you were told there was no attic. But now you can hear it, someone slowly flipping through thick, ancient pages in the ceiling above. Each turn like sandpaper dragged over stone. You back away from the ledger, away from the nail, from the choice. But the sound doesn't stop. You glance up and for a moment, just a breath of time, the ceiling isn't there. You see rafters, a dim lantern swinging, and a long table cluttered with ledgers. Ledgers like yours. Hundreds. Maybe more. And figures hunched over them, not reading, copying. Your name might be just one entry in a much, much larger system. Mainstream historical fact: in certain monastic traditions during the 13th century, monks were forbidden from writing down certain names aloud, unless they were preceded by prayers. Not for protection of the living, but to prevent summoning the attention of what might be listening through the ink. This idea of names as triggers thresholds even goes back thousands of years. You think of the landlady's cards, of the blacked out names in the library, of the whispers through the keyhole. The ledger is no longer just a record, it's a door. In your name, it's the keyhole. Fringe tidbit. A forgotten Germanic folktale tells of a village where each name had a shadow title, a mirrored version of the name spoken only once in a person's life during their funeral. To speak it early was to invite your reflection to walk on without you. You wonder now if the name you go by, the one written in the ledger, is your real name at all. You glance back toward the window. The figure is gone. But your shadow remains, and it's smiling. The candle gutters again, throwing the room into momentary blackness. When the flame returns, there's something different about your surroundings. Your bag is back. Your coat hangs neatly on the chair. A cup of tea steaming sits on the windowsill, though you never boiled water. And next to it, a new page in the ledger, blank, except for one line written in perfect old-fashioned script. You may write your own ending, but only once. The bell in your hand begins to warm. Not dangerously, comfortably, like the heat of skin. It pulses softly, keeping time with your heartbeat. You sit, the ledger before you, the bell beside you, the nail between your fingers. You remember Tomash's voice trembling behind the bakery counter. The nails aren't just to seal the coffin, they're to mark choice. You understand now. The rules weren't made to keep ghosts out. They were made to keep you in, to keep you from becoming one of them. So you pick up the pen that wasn't there before. Dipped in ink dark as sleep, you write one word. Not your name. A title. A word only you know. The candle goes out. The bell rings. Just once. And everything stills. Historians still argue whether this town exists on any official map. Some believe it was swallowed in a border shift lost in a war claimed by fog. Others think it only appears when someone needs it like a test that no one remembers passing. But you remember now, because when the morning comes and the fog lifts just enough, you're no longer inside the boarding house. You're standing at the cemetery gate, alone, watching like all those before you. A new figure approaches down the road, uncertain, tired, and just curious enough to step inside. You check your pocket, 6 nails now. And your shadow? It waves. You wait by the gate, not because you've been told to, not even because it's expected. You wait because it's what you did once. Back when you were the one approaching, unsure of the fog, curious about bells. And something was here then too. Waiting. Watching. The figure on the road gets closer. You can't make out details yet. Just a shape in the mist stepping carefully, hesitating often. You don't blame them. The town has a way of thinning the brave into the cautious. You don't speak. That's not part of the greeting. Instead, you check the nails in your pocket again. 6 of them. Still bent. Still inward. Still warm. Like a pulse passed down through metal. You don't remember collecting the 6th one, but it's there all the same. That's how it works, apparently. Time and memory tangle differently here. The fog carries things, names, images, decisions like dust in folds of velvet. Back in town, windows begin to flicker with candlelight again. Doors unbolt with groans. Curtains shift as if the houses are exhaling. Life returns, but only in the shallowest sense. You know now what they are: stage dressing, safety theater, ritual pantomime, a town rehearsing its own denial. Mainstream historical fact: in 15th century Lithuania, entire villages were built as boundary sanctuaries, places meant to rest on spiritual thresholds. The architecture, rituals, and even diet of residents were designed to reflect liminality, neither holy nor cursed, but constantly on the edge. Many of these towns had no recorded entrances or exits, just circular roads and seasonal paths that vanished each year. This town, you realize, may be one of those sanctuaries, or something older. Something built not to protect the living from the dead, but to keep both from overlapping too loudly. You finally speak to the figure on the road when they step into range. Not too close, you murmur. They pause. They can't see your face, not yet. You say there are rules. They ask, are you the keeper? You almost laugh. You want to say, no, I was just visiting. You want to say, I'm trying to leave. You want to say, I think I remember your voice. But instead, you say, I hold the bell. That seems to be enough. They nod, and they don't ask to come in. Not yet. They move on, not toward you, but toward the chapel. That's a good sign. You watch until they're out of view. And then you hear it. Not the bell. A whisper. Inside your own house again. You walk back slowly, the path bending in ways you've stopped questioning. Your reflection reappears in windows now, usually where it doesn't belong. Always a half-second behind. The front door is ajar. Inside the room looks unchanged, except the candle is lit again, and next to it sits a new object, a spool of red twine. You pick it up. It's warm, fringed tidbit. In several alpine burial traditions, red twine was used to tie shut the mouths of the dead. Not to prevent speech, but to prevent breath. Breath was considered a vehicle for memory, and a spirit's final exhalation could trap thoughts inside walls echoing forever. You've been breathing steadily, until now, because beside the twine sits a new ledger, different from the one before. This one has only 3 names written so far. The first is yours. The second is blurred out like someone tried to erase it and the paper fought back. The third is blank. You set down the nail and place a hand over the name you do remember yours. It feels heavy even though it's just ink. And you wonder, is the third space for the next visitor or for you again? You look up, your reflection is in the mirror. It's still, but the one in the window. It waves. You stare at the reflection in the window. It waves again, slow, deliberate, a motion too steady to be casual. But it's not mocking you. It's not threatening. It's patient, like it knows this was always part of the plan. You don't wave back. You've learned. Instead, you return your gaze to the ledger. The third line is still blank. You run your fingers over the parchment, feeling the tiniest vibration beneath your skin, like a current passing just under the surface. The space is hungry. That's the only way to describe it. Not empty waiting. You pick up the red twine. Let it unspool across your fingers. You think about what it could bind, what it has bound before. And you wonder if all the bindings in this town nails knots. Names are just parts of the same ritual being performed over and over by different hands. The candle flickers again, a pulse of blue in its base like a tiny storm. You feel pressure in the air, not sound, not movement, just expectation. And then the bell rings, just once. You don't flinch this time. You've grown used to its language. Each ring carries meaning now, like Morse code carved in silence. This one says, choose again. Mainstream historical fact: in certain medieval abbeys, monks performed prayers of inversion during times of spiritual uncertainty. These were whispered in reverse order, recited at liminal hours between midnight and 1, or between 3 and 4 times, when the body is weakest and belief can flicker. It wasn't about clarity. It was about acknowledging uncertainty as sacred. You consider doing the same now, but there's no liturgy for what you are anymore. You are no longer a visitor. You are something else. You pick up the nail the 7th now, though. You never felt the 6th arrive. 7 is a sacred number in this town, whispered behind hands carved in fence posts. 7 days of silence. 7 steps to the chapel. 7 tolls before the gate first opened to you. You remember. 7 shadows the night after the 13th bell. 7 shapes circling your bed that did not breathe. And now, 7 nails in your pocket. 7 pages left in the new ledger. You close it gently, place the bell atop it, and tie a single loop of red twine around the whole thing. A seal, a placeholder, a boundary. You feel steadier now, until the knock comes, not at your door, at your mirror. 3 raps, clear, crisp, like knuckles on glass. You don't turn to face it. You already know what you'll see. You say, that's not an entrance. A pause, then a whisper. It is if you forget where you are. You sigh, more tired than afraid. Fringe tidbit. In ancient Etruscan burial rites, it was believed that mirrors held the doorway between the waking and the gone, not as passages, but as maps. The dead would learn from their reflections how to retrace their path, back into breath, back into bone. The trick was to never let your reflection walk ahead of you. You stand. Your reflection stands too, but it doesn't knock again. It simply waits. And then it smiles. Only this time it's not your smile. It's hers. The girl with the red ribbon. Your mirror darkens. A smudge begins to bloom outward from the center like ink spilled in water. You speak aloud, what do you want? And from behind the glass, in that not quite voice to be remembered differently. The fog outside presses against the window like breath on cold glass. You can see shapes in it again. Moving, slowly, not aimless, but circular. You realize what they're doing. They're walking a perimeter. They're closing the circle. Historians still argue whether haunted places are locations where death lingers or where memory itself has been cursed. The town offers a third possibility. What if it's neither? What if some places remember more than they should? You stare into the mirror until the face fades, and you say softly, you can't come in. No answer. But a second later, the mirror cracks. Just once. A hairline fracture down the middle like a seam opening. You don't touch it. You've learned. The ledger pulses faintly on the table, almost like a heartbeat. The candle goes out, and the bell begins to ring. Once, twice, 3 times. The circle is closing. The bell tolls a 4th time. You count the seconds between each note, 7 exactly. The timing is deliberate, ritualistic. You no longer think of the bell as an object. It's a voice now, one with its own cadence and vocabulary. It's not ringing to warn you. It's calling roll. A 5th toll. You glance at the mirror again. The crack down the center has grown spidering toward the edges, like something inside is pushing out. Not trying to escape, trying to become visible. The face of the girl with the red ribbon still lingers faintly in the glass like breath on a car window. Her eyes don't blink. They shimmer like wet ink. The sixth toll. The fog outside is rising, curling above the rooftops now. The stars vanish one by one, devoured by the slow boil of white. Somewhere out there, the processional walk around the cemetery continues. You can't see them anymore, but you can hear their steps. And for the first time, you hear something else mixed in. Chains, dragging. Mainstream historical fact, in some corners of early 19th century Welsh folklore, funerary processions were believed to be accompanied by corpse chains, invisible bonds carried by mourners to weigh the spirit down to keep it from drifting too far from the body before burial. It wasn't punishment, it was prevention, a way to anchor a soul to silence. Now the chains are here, the seventh toll. The ledger glows faintly on the table, illuminated not by candlelight but by something internal. The cover flexes slightly, expands, contracts. It breathes. The page with your name twitches at the corner as if stirred by a wind that hasn't entered the room. You lift the seventh nail. It hums softly in your palm. You could drive it through the page. You could walk into the mirror. You could answer the door. But instead you look at your shadow. It no longer moves with you. It's standing in the center of the room now, facing you, taller than before, slightly misshapen like it's learned to stand differently in someone else's skin. You take a step to the left. It doesn't follow. Fringe tidbit. In Moldavian superstition, shadows can untether during moments of spiritual fracture, especially when names are used improperly, or when a person begins to forget which version of themselves is the real one. The shadow will continue acting out the old self until the body either rejoins it or lets it take their place entirely. You stare at it. It tilts its head and smiles, but not like you, like someone who's been waiting their whole life to take a turn. The eighth toll. You can feel the cemetery now. Not see it. Feel it. The weight of the earth. The tilt of the stones. The shape of the names. You know where every grave is, even the ones no one admits are there. Especially those. You feel the shallow ones. The ones still warm. You sit because you have to, because your legs no longer agree on which direction is forward. You tie the red twine around the nail, you don't know why, you just do. And the ledger responds. The page turns itself to the next blank line. There's no name written, just a space, a question. The ninth toll. The window cracks. A splintering hiss, like breath through clenched teeth. Fog floods into the room without shattering the glass. It pours across the floor, gentle and thick. It feels like being watched by memory itself. Cold, but personal. The bell rings a 10th time. Your reflection in the mirror fades entirely. Not replaced, not erased, just gone. The room gets quieter with each toll, as if sound is being turned inside out. Not muted, inverted. The 11th toll. Your shadow speaks. Not out loud, but inside your head. Words you've never said aloud. It's your turn now. Come see what you've preserved. And the 12th toll. Everything stops. Still. Weightless. You feel like you've stepped outside time. Outside breath. Just you, the ledger, the nail, and the silence. You know what's next. The 13th toll. The final crossing. Historians still argue whether 13th bells were ever truly used in funeral rites or if they were only legend. The idea of the 13th appears everywhere. The 13th step, the 13th row, the unlisted pew. Always absent, always implied. Some say it was a safety measure, a refusal to name the final step aloud. Others think it was a warning. You press the nail against the blank page, and the bell tolls once more. The 13th. And from behind the mirror, something knocks. Once, then twice. Then, you knock back. The instant your knuckles tap the mirror, the air stiffens like water going rigid. Time doesn't stop. It holds its breath. Everything around you dims, not in brightness, but in clarity. Edges blur. Sound flattens. You can feel your pulse, but only as an echo, like it's happening to someone else somewhere nearby. The crack in the glass stops growing. Instead, it shimmers. Like the mirror has decided this is no longer damage. It's a doorway. Your shadow moves again. Not to mimic you, but to lead. It walks to the mirror, stands in front of it, and reaches out with a slow, knowing hand. Its fingertips press against the glass, and you hear a sound you can't explain, like a breath inhaled by something that doesn't have lungs. The glass ripples. Not like water. Like parchment catching fire under the surface, soft golden threads spiraling outward. Your reflection returns, but it's not you. It's the girl with the red ribbon again. She's older now, exactly your age. She places her palm on the other side of the glass, matching the position of your shadow. Then she speaks. Not aloud, but the words land in your mind like stones dropped in a well. The record must close, the name must cross. You turn back to the ledger. It has turned again now, resting on the last page. Your name is there, written twice, once in ink, once in shadow. Only one is underlined. You look down at the nail still wrapped in red twine. You think, if I drive it through the underlined name, maybe this ends. Maybe this loops. Maybe I leave. You think of Tomasz, the landlady, the candle shop with no candles lit. Were they like you once? Did they hold the bell? Did they write their own ending? Mainstream historical fact in medieval Belgian burial culture. Certain towns maintained double death registries, one for names and one for echoes. The echo ledger contained symbols instead of words. It wasn't meant to record who had died, but who was still being remembered. Once both entries matched, the spirit was said to settle. But what if the entries never matched? What if the echo outlived the name? Fringe tidbit. In a 1902 occult manuscript attributed to an anonymous Bohemian monk, there's a ritual for returning a reflection that has wandered. The process involves writing your name backward, tying it with red cord, and offering it to the nearest mirrored surface before dawn. The ritual ends with one line: do not flinch when you see yourself walk away. You pick up the pen. Your hand moves without instruction. You write your name backward, each stroke quiet, decisive, like cutting thread. You set the pen down. You place the name, the nail, and the red cord beside the mirror. Your shadow watches, and so does the girl. Then she smiles and walks away, not into darkness, but into fog. Fog that doesn't press or smother but lifts. The mirror clears. Your reflection returns. Tired, but yours. The candle flares suddenly, then steadies. The wax has pooled. The air smells of iron and paper and old leaves. And the bell. Silent. You open the door. For the first time since arriving, the fog doesn't fight you. It rolls aside gently, revealing a morning sky you almost forgot existed. Pale. Blue. Alive. You walk outside. Not to leave. Not yet. But to walk a circuit. Your own. One that no one else has walked. A single revolution of the town, the cemetery, the chapel, the tower. Not to seal anything. Just to say I was here. I made a mark. Historians still argue whether this place was ever real. Whether it sat on any map. But those who've been here never forget it. Even if they want to. You touch the iron gate, cool, harmless, and when you look down, your shadow matches you step for step. Not ahead, not behind. With you, the mirror is quiet. The ledger is closed, and somewhere a bell waits, just in case. You walk the town as the sun climbs higher, though its light still feels conditional. It's warm, yes, but not committed. Like it's trying to remember how to be sunlight again after too many fog-heavy mornings. The shadows on the buildings are real this time, sharp-edged, no longer crawling off on their own. Each corner you turn feels less warped. The roads lead where they're supposed to. The alley that once looped back to the cemetery now only leads to a back garden filled with lilacs and damp leaves. The square has music playing again, soft, stringy old. A man plucks a violin in front of the chapel steps, and though the tune is unfamiliar, it feels like something you've always known. The townsfolk are out too. Not many. They still walk carefully, still glance toward the gate, but their eyes meet yours now. They nod. Some smile. The performance is over. Or maybe you're part of it now. You visit Tomasz. His shop smells of bread again. He offers you a warm roll, no charge, and a mug of tea that tastes faintly of rosemary and salt. When you ask what happened to the ledger, he raises an eyebrow and says only, "Which one?" You leave without pressing. Mainstream historical fact. Many towns in Eastern Europe used to designate roles not through election or inheritance, but through ritual participation. If you performed a sacred duty during a liminal event, say a funeral, that coincided with a full moon, you were considered spiritually bound to that role until someone else performed the same act. No ceremony, no explanation, just succession by action. You think about the mirror, the nail, the final bell, and you understand now. You didn't defeat anything. You didn't win. You inherited. At the edge of the square, you pass a group of children playing near the chapel fence. One of them has drawn a rough outline of a bell in chalk. Another has taken a rusty nail and pressed it into the center like a compass needle. They look at you. The youngest girl says, "We heard it last night." The 13th. You nod. "Was it for you?" she asks. You hesitate. "No," you say. "It was for the part of me that stayed behind." She nods back, serious beyond her years. "Good. They don't like it when the wrong ones ring." You continue walking. You visit the old bell tower just to be sure. It's still leaning, still broken, still doorless. But something's different. There's a feeling of completion in the air, like a sentence that finally ended after decades hanging mid-thought. You peer through the iron grating. The rope is gone. No bell hangs there now. Just silence. Fringe tidbit. In an obscure Carpathian codex, there's a passage describing a bell that rings forward but not down. A symbol of transitions that don't end, just reorient. It's drawn with no clapper. The text reads, "When the ringer becomes the rope, all other ropes may rest." You leave the tower behind. At the chapel, the front doors, once nailed shut from the inside, are wide open. You step inside. It's smaller than you remember. Or maybe your roll has grown. The pews are empty. The altar is bare. But on the lectern sits a single object. A new ledger, blank, waiting. And beside it, a mirror, untouched, clean. You stare at your reflection. It stares back, calm, whole, patient. It does not wave. You exhale, a real breath this time. Not watched, not ritualized, just yours. Historians still argue whether towns like this disappear after their role is fulfilled, or if they simply fold inward until they're needed again. A crease in the map, a wrinkle in memory. But you know the truth now. Some towns don't vanish. They rest until they're remembered. You don't pick up the new ledger. Not yet. Instead, you sit on the chapel's front step. The stone is cool beneath you, worn smooth by time and weather, and the backs of countless others who've sat just like this, waiting, watching, wondering if they'd crossed the final line, or simply stepped sideways. The town exhales around you. It no longer feels like it's holding its breath, guarding secrets in every shadow. It feels tired, grateful, like an orchestra whose final note has been played and is now basking in the echo. You scan the square. There's no fog, no mirror children, no miscounted shadows, just people. People whose smiles don't tremble. People who walk toward each other, not away. A boy balances a loaf of bread on his head. A dog barks once just to hear itself. Somewhere a chime rings delicate, incidental, meaningless. Not the bell. You've begun to separate those sounds in your mind. You know now which ones hold power and which ones are merely decoration. You also know how fragile that line is, how quickly it can be crossed, and how long it takes to find your way back. Mainstream historical fact in 18th century German pietist communities, it was customary to perform a closing ritual after a long vigil, placing a symbolic object, often a nail or a button, into a small wooden box that was then sealed and buried. The idea was not to forget the event, but to anchor it in place, to keep it from leaking forward into the future. You feel like that box now, a container with 7 bent nails in your pocket and an entire town's silence folded inside your ribs. At noon, the clock tower ticks 12 times. Only 12. No 13th. You smile. You rise. You return to the chapel and look at the ledger again. Its cover is plain, unlike the previous ones, with worn edges or smoke-scarred corners. This one is smooth, almost unfinished. It has no title, no ownership marks, but when you open it, there's a single sentence on the first page. This time you choose what is remembered. The ink is still wet. You close the book. You aren't ready to write yet. Not because you're afraid, but because writing is permanent. And for the first time since you arrived, nothing feels urgent. There's no ticking clock, no approaching figure, no mirror cracking under pressure. There's only space and time, and the quiet reassurance that for once the story has caught up to itself. Fringe tidbit. A nearly forgotten belief in Basque folklore suggests that some places retain memory better than people do. That the land, if left undisturbed, becomes a kind of library, but not of facts, of choices. Every nail driven, every bell tolled, every word withheld becomes part of that place's rhythm. Not good or evil, just recorded. You run a finger along the edge of the mirror beside the lectern. It doesn't ripple, doesn't reflect anything unusual. Just you, still here, still whole. Outside, the light has changed again. Warmer, late afternoon. You walk slowly back to the boarding house, now just a house. The landlady's chair on the porch is empty, but a fresh cup of tea sits beside it. You drink it. It tastes of mint and iron and peace. You rest for a while. Not because you're being hunted, not because you're hiding, but because you're allowed to. That night, for the first time, you sleep through until morning. No knocks, no bells, no dreams. Just the wind gently rustling through the leaves that no longer whisper your name. You wake to the sound of birds. Actual birds. Not bells in disguise or owls dropping tokens from the sky, but sparrows chirping with that unmistakable, irrelevant confidence birds always seem to have. It's the first morning since your arrival that you don't check your shadow before getting out of bed. You already know it's where it should be. Outside, the streets feel real. Not because they weren't before, but because now they feel uninterested in you. And that's comforting. The houses creak like old friends stretching their joints. Laundry flaps on lines. Someone sweeps a step. A black cat trots past with a stolen sausage in its mouth. Normal is a miracle. You cross the square and walk the long way around the chapel just to feel the sun on your face. You pass the east wall of the cemetery, the one they say makes milk curdle and compasses spin. Today it smells like lilacs and clean stone. There's no hum, no whisper, no gate. It's just a wall. Mainstream historical fact, some villages in early Renaissance Italy built false cemeteries, mirror versions of the real one to confuse spirits. Decoy headstones, walls with no gates, even illusory chapels drawn with chalk. The idea was to convince wandering souls that they had reached their destination and didn't need to search further. Many of these ghost gardens were indistinguishable from the real thing. You wonder if your town ever did that, or if it was the decoy all along. You stop by the candle shop where the shelves are full for the first time. Beeswax columns, red tapers, tiny black votives that smell of anise and lemon peel. The owner, Annetta, nods at you without speaking, just places a small copper bell on the counter. It's unbound, untuned, silent. I thought you might want to choose when it rings, she says. You nod and take it. You carry it in your palm, feeling the chill of metal slowly warming to your skin. It doesn't vibrate, doesn't threaten. It's not alive with memory. It's new. Blank. Yours. You walk to the river's edge, past the willow tree where you first thought you saw something watching. Its branches trail in the water, stirring little ripples that move like sentences whispered across silence. You sit. You breathe. And you begin to remember everything without fear. Fringe, tidbit. In Silesian ghost lore, the act of remembering calmly was thought to put spirits back to bed. Agitation fed them. Stillness dissolved them. To recite a haunting aloud in sunlight was considered the final step to ending it. So you do? Quietly, not aloud, just in the mind. The cemetery that grew its own fence. The nails that faced inward. The bell that rang itself from the floorboards. The child with your face. The shadow that tried to greet you. You remember them all. And then you let them go. You untie the red twine in your pocket and toss it into the water. It floats, then sinks without struggle. You press the blank bell to your lips. And you don't ring it, because it's not time. Because there's nothing that needs summoning. Because this part of the story is closed. When you return to the chapel, the ledger is gone. In its place is a blank sheet of vellum pressed flat beneath a stone. No quill, no ink, just a place to begin should you wish. Historians still argue whether endings in folklore are ever truly endings or just moments when the telling stops because the storyteller ran out of breath. In this town, you've learned that every ending is simply a choice not to continue. A pause, a kindness, a deep, relieved breath. So you walk the path home, the long one, the one that winds gently with no loops, where each step feels like it leads away, not back. And this time the fog doesn't follow. You leave the town without fanfare. No procession walks you out. No bells toll behind you. The road, which once curved back on itself like a snake chasing its tail, now stretches forward clean, dry, lined with whispering grass. The trees grow farther apart the farther you walk, like the town itself is loosening its grip. You glance behind you once. Just once. The rooftops are still visible. The spire of the chapel. The crooked lean of the old tower. The faint shimmer of morning fog curling lazily along the edge of the cemetery wall. But there's nothing watching you now. Not from windows. Not from mirrors. You walk on. You keep the bell in your pocket. You tell yourself you won't ring it. Not unless you need to. But you also know that someday you might. Mainstream historical fact travelers in certain ancient nomadic societies were instructed to carry a small token from the last village they visited. Not for luck, but for continuity. If something happened to them on the road, the token would tell the next town where they'd been. It was a thread through geography and memory. You realize that's what the bell is now. A thread, not a threat. Not anymore. The hours pass. The sky grows bigger. The land stretches wide, unwrinkled by ritual. You see the occasional farmhouse, a windmill, a child waving from a garden gate, and none of them stare too long. No one squints at your shadow. You rest beneath a cypress tree as the sun begins to lean west. The leaves above you whisper without urgency. Your dreams are shallow and dry, like folded paper boats drifting down a lazy stream. When you wake, someone has left bread beside you. Still warm, you smile. Fringe tidbit. In some forgotten corners of Lapland, it was believed that kindness given without being seen created a form of protective memory, an invisible tether that kept wanderers safe as long as they didn't try to trace it back. The rule was simple: if you are blessed in the wild, keep walking. So you do. You don't ask who left the bread. You don't retrace your steps. You simply keep going, following the road as it bends gently north. You pass stone markers with mossy ridges, a rusted mailbox with no name, a signpost with arrows worn blank by wind, and still you walk. You wonder sometimes if anyone else remembers that town. You suspect they do. You begin to notice things now, subtle things in other places. A single bent nail on a park bench, a red ribbon tied around a tree, a bell that rings in the distance on a cloudless day. You don't stop walking, but you nod when you see these things. You acknowledge them not as threats, but as echoes. Not all echoes are warnings. Some are reminders. You meet people. You stay in inns. You trade stories. Not the whole truth, just fragments. Just enough to test the air. You learn quickly who's seen something and who hasn't. Some tell you about dreams they've had, of gates that don't open, of rules no one taught but everyone followed, of names they don't remember forgetting. You listen, and sometimes you write those names down. Not in a ledger, just in a notebook. Pencil only. Never ink. You never stay too long. But you're not running anymore. You're keeping pace with something. Something slow. Something old. Something sacred. Historians still argue whether there are real places like the one you left, or if they're just metaphors that people build when life outpaces understanding. But you've learned the truth. It doesn't matter if it's real. It remembers you, and you remember it, not as a curse, not as a trap, but as a choice you made and kept. You reach a town one evening that almost feels familiar. It isn't. Not truly. The trees are too tall, the roof's too flat, the language on the signs just a few syllables off from what you've grown used to. But there's something in the air, an undertone of iron and candle wax, the way laughter here falls just a beat slower than expected. It doesn't alarm you. It intrigues you. You book a room at a small inn. Upstairs, third floor window facing the hills. The key is heavy in your palm and warm to the touch, worn from use. Someone has stayed in this room before. Many someones. That's comforting. You set your bag down, unpack slowly. You place the bell gently on the nightstand. It hasn't rung in days, and you haven't felt compelled to test it. Not even once. Still, you never leave it behind. You walk the streets after sunset. This town is livelier than the last. Children run freely, merchants pack up. Slowly people nod and call good night to one another with unguarded voices. You breathe it all in like fresh air. Yet every few blocks your eyes catch something. A gate with no hinges, a patch of ground unusually free of footprints, a window left open in a house with no lights. And you know some of them remember. They may not talk about it. They may not know what it was, but they feel it the way old trees feel wind before it arrives. Mainstream historical fact: in a handful of Balkan villages, it was once customary to leave a spoonful of uncooked rice by the threshold of a home each night, not for guests, but for memories. The act wasn't symbolic. It was practical. If a ghost had nowhere else to go, it could rest there. The rice was replaced each morning. No one ever checked if it was eaten. You pass a door with rice beside it. You don't knock. You nod. You keep walking. At the edge of town, you find a field. Wide open, moonlit. There's no one around. The night is quiet. And so, finally, you do something you haven't done since you left the cemetery behind. You speak your own name aloud. Just once, softly. The wind doesn't shift. The shadows don't react. But you feel something click back into place like a puzzle piece forgotten in your pocket that finally finds its way home. You return to the inn and sit by the window. You write a few things down. Not everything, just the things that are yours. Fringe tidbit. In the folklore of the Sami people, there's a concept known as bjoret aiget, a good hour. These are rare, quiet moments where time stops measuring forward motion and instead becomes a still pool. What you think, what you choose, What you remember in that hour leaves a mark not on history but on possibility.
You are in such an hour now.
You right. I walked into a town that feared its own cemetery. I followed rules I wasn't told. I rang the bell. I wrote the name. I chose. You close the notebook. You ring the bell. Not hard, not loud. Just once. Because this time it's not about warning or summoning. It's about marking a moment. You fall asleep with the bell still warm in your palm. And when you dream, it is not of gates or shadows or watchers. It is of a field filled with mirrors, all reflecting the version of you that made it out. And none of them wave. They only nod. Respectfully, like one guardian to another. You wake before dawn. The sky outside your window is painted in that soft, bruised blue that comes just before sunlight. The kind of light that doesn't cast shadows, only suggests them. You feel rested. Not just in your body, but in the way your memory settles like dust that's finally stopped drifting. The bell is cool again, motionless. You slip it back into your pocket, not like a weapon, not even like a tool, just something that belongs to you now. Like a house key, like a name. You pack your things. The notebook goes into the bag unfinished. There's still room in it for more, but not today. Today you're just passing through. The innkeeper nods as you check out. She doesn't ask your name, but she does slide a piece of paper across the counter. On it a sketch. A crooked gate, a field of stones, and beside it 2 silhouettes, one waving, one watching. Nothing is written, but you both know what it means. You fold it once, no need to carry it. It's already inside you. You leave town as the sun crests the hills. The light is clean this time, committed. And your shadow follows exactly as it should, attached, obedient, not a whisper ahead or behind. It behaves now, not because it's bound, but because you earned it. Mainstream historical fact, in some pre-Christian Slavic cultures, the shadow is considered a separate soul, not born with you, but assigned during early childhood. A child's first step into the morning light was carefully observed, where the shadow landed, how it moved. It determined their name, their luck, their role in the village. If the shadow refused to appear, the child was said to have walked in too early, before they were truly meant to arrive. You think now of your first day in the town. You had no shadow that morning, just fog. Now every step you take draws a perfect silhouette in the dust, and still you notice signs faint and scattered. A tree tied with red twine, a shop bell that rings without a door opening, a nail bent and resting on a bench. You leave each one alone. They're not warnings anymore. They're markers. You pass a man on the road, old and bent, carrying a sack of something that clinks with each step. He doesn't greet you. But as he passes, he hums a tune. The same tune that you once whistled back before you knew better. It's not dangerous here. Not anymore. You walk for miles. And with each step, the weight in your pocket grows lighter, not because the bell is changing, but because you are. The story no longer clings to you. It walks behind you politely, far enough away that you can breathe. You were its voice for a while. Now someone else will carry it. Fringe tidbit. In the oral traditions of certain northern tribes, stories were believed to detach from their tellers once fully spoken. If told truthfully and completely, the story would choose a new host, someone who needed it more. The original teller would be left with only a hum in their chest, like a bell no longer rung but never forgotten. You feel that hum now. Not urgent, not haunting, just there, soft, alive. You reach the top of a hill as evening returns. Below in the valley, another village waits. Lanterns already glow in the dusk. Smoke curls from chimneys. You see a chapel spire crooked, but not that crooked. A tower, yes, but no bell. Not yet. You step forward, downhill, toward warmth, toward new rules. Not to stay, just to notice, just to listen, and perhaps one day soon to answer a knock. But only if they say your name correctly. The path into the next town is simple, uncomplicated. That's the first sign that something's different. No curve that wasn't there yesterday, no road that loops back onto itself like a trick. Just a gentle descent into another quiet valley. Still, your pace slows as you approach. Not out of fear, out of caution. Out of respect. You've learned that towns, especially old ones, listen. Not with ears, but with dirt. With stone. With silence. And what you carry now isn't just a bell in your pocket. It's a presence. A memory that has shaped itself into a shape other places notice. So when you reach the wooden sign that names this place Liptovska Mara, you pause. You place your hand on the worn wood. No reason. Just acknowledgement. You enter with no ceremony. just footsteps, just breath. The buildings here are smaller, scattered, not huddled like the last town. Space is welcome here. You feel it in the wide porches, the uncluttered paths, the lack of fences. It's a village that trusts itself. But trust doesn't mean ignorance. You pass a cottage where the porch light flickers once then steadies. You notice, you say nothing. Mainstream historical fact in some 17th century Slovakian towns, visitors were not greeted with words or signs, but with light. A window shutter opened, a candle relit, a lantern doused and relit again. These were not superstitions. They were dialects, part of a quiet language spoken only by those who'd walked between thresholds before. You recognize the dialect now. You understand the syntax of subtlety. You check into the inn. One room left. A key that looks like it's never been replaced. Your host asks your name. You hesitate, but not for long. You give it. And he nods like you said something true. That night you dream, but not of mirrors. You dream of trees, of knots in the bark tied with red twine and birdsong that doesn't echo. You dream of a town that once feared its own cemetery, and of the moment it stopped. You wake before dawn and walk the empty streets. There's a chapel. Of course there is, but it's different. Humble. No tower, no bell. Not yet. You sit on the stone steps just as you did in the other town. You pull out your notebook, and for the first time you don't write about what was. You write about what could be. Fringe tidbit. In the oral stories passed down by elderly stonecutters in northern Slovakia, it's said that some towns are born not from settlers or land deeds, but from stories. The tale comes first whispered between travelers, and only after enough people believe it the streets appear. The chimneys rise, the bells begin to ring. You wonder if this town is one of those stories. Maybe you're here early, maybe you're here to help it form. You ring your bell once, soft, low. Not for warning, not for ritual, just to say hello. No shadows shift, no gates creak. But the window in the chapel opens, just a little, just enough. The window remains open, not wide, not daring, just cracked as if the building itself is stretching after a long sleep. You feel no urge to enter. You've learned not to mistake invitation for permission. The chapel is awake now. That's enough. You spend the day wandering the village. There's a school with no bell, a post office that smells of dried lavender, a bakery that sells salt bread in paper folded like old letters. The people greet you not with suspicion or warmth, but with recognition, like they've seen something in you not on your face, but in your presence, a familiar cadence, a subtle shape in the air. You ask no questions, neither do they. At the edge of town you find a narrow path that leads into the hills. A wooden fence runs alongside it, its posts capped with small nails, each bent slightly rusted but clean. You run your hand along them as you walk, counting as you go. 7 nails, of course. You follow the path until it opens into a clearing. A tree stands at the center, old, wide, gnarled. It leans slightly east, and its branches hang low heavy with ribbon. Red ribbons, some faded pink, others deep scarlet, a few fresh vivid, almost defiant. They flutter gently in the breeze, and you realize this is not a memorial. This is a registry. Each ribbon a rule, each knot a memory. Mainstream historical fact across the Balkans, trees were often designated as binding trees, where locals would tie cloth yarn or paper as offerings not to gods, but to promises. Some were for healing, others for protection. A few more rarely were tied with the intent to seal something in. These were never cut down. If one fell, its stump was buried rather than burned. You step closer. The tree hums softly, not a sound exactly, but a pressure, like standing beside a tuning fork held still. You don't tie a ribbon. You're not here to bind. You're here to remember. Fringe tidbit. In a half-buried manuscript found in a ruined Carpathian monastery, a passage reads, "Only those who walk away without tying may carry the story forward. The rest become roots." You smile. You touch the bark. It's warm. Back in the village, you notice something you didn't before the chapel's door is open now. No one is inside. No candles burn. Just a bench and a window. Light falls in perfectly, forming a small square on the floorboards. You sit. You take out the blank sheet you folded so many days ago. You write only 2 words. Still listening. You leave it on the bench. And when you turn back to the door, a child is waiting at the edge of the square. She asks, "Is it your town now?" You shake your head. Not this one. She tilts hers, but one of them. You nod. She doesn't smile, but she understands. And she says, We'll wait until it's needed again. You leave Liptovska Mara at dawn. There are no goodbyes, no farewells. Just the quiet understanding that you've done what needed doing even if no one could name it out loud. The fog doesn't rise to stop you. The chapel door doesn't creak shut behind you. The red-ribboned tree stands undisturbed, still whispering silently into the hills. You walk. As you do, something shifts. Not in the world in you. You no longer feel like a visitor moving from place to place. You feel like a carrier. Like someone gently passing a story forward one step at a time. You arrive in another village by mid-morning. This one has no name on the sign. It's blank wood nailed crookedly to a post. But there are fresh footprints on the road and smoke from chimneys. The people here are quiet but not afraid. They seem to know that you know things. You rent a room. You unpack your notebook. You start a new page. This time you begin with a question. How does a town begin to forget its own fear? Mainstream historical fact: in early Czech border towns, a tradition known as Shedý obrat, the gray turning marked the shift between the haunted and the peaceful. The town bell would be rung once on the day a long-standing superstition was declared broken. The toll wasn't joyful. It was somber, like a release of breath after years of holding it. You listen closely that night. No bells ring. Not yet. But you expect them, not in dread and readiness. You walk the streets. You count lampposts. You note the house with a mirror hung outside its front door. You see a child skipping rope with her shadow out of sync. You leave a nail on a step. Just one. Bent. No one sees you do it. You don't stay long, but you stay long enough to listen. Fringe tidbit. In the old archives of a monastery buried by ash in the 1400s, a scroll reads, "We do not end hauntings. We soften them like cloth worn thin. Let them fade, and when they are only stories, the living may sing again." You walk on. You hum. Not a tune of summoning. Just something small, something safe. And as you crest the next hill, you hear behind you not a bell, not a knock, but a voice from some window calling. It's safer now. And it is. By now you can recognize the signs within moments of arrival. A town that's slightly too quiet after sundown. A chapel whose bell has been removed but not replaced. A square where no one walks through the middle after dark. The subtle choreography of caution. You don't ask if something happened here. You don't need to. You simply listen. This new place name, faded from its signage, is nestled between hills and river. There's a bridge that groans beneath even your lightest step, and a water wheel that hasn't turned in years. But the bakery is open. The butcher whistles. The postmistress smiles too broadly. They're keeping something down, and they're very tired. Mainstream historical fact: in 19th century Romania, it was believed that a community could exhaust a haunting through repetition. If the town followed the same rituals daily, same greetings, same church bells, same songs at dusk, the haunting would lose interest, wear itself out, or simply forget what it came for. You walk the same path each day. Same turn at the bakery, same stop at the stone well, same seat beneath the broken clock tower. You blend in. You become part of the ritual. Until the pattern shifts. One night the wind changes direction. The fog comes early. And a window you've passed a dozen times flickers with candlelight for the first time. You knock. No answer. You don't enter. But you leave something on the windowsill, a folded piece of paper with 2 words. Still listening. Fringe tidbit. A vanished village in southern Poland was once known for its echo houses. Homes built with curved interior walls to trap sound. Not for music or warmth, but to hold voices too faint for memory. It was said that if you listened closely enough, you could hear someone remembering something they never told anyone. You feel that echo here. The next morning, someone has left you a cup of broth on the chapel steps, still warm. Inside it, a single nail. Unbent. New. You take it. You carry it. You move on. You've learned that not every town needs saving. Some just need witnesses. Some just need someone to say, "Yes, I see it." You're not imagining this. And once that's said, the shadows loosen. Just slightly. Just enough. You spend one more night in town writing by candlelight. Your notebook grows heavier with names, images, smells, jokes, pauses. Not curses. Not ghosts. Just stories. The fog never rolls in fully that night. You wake early. You leave a bell beneath the chapel's threshold, wrapped in red twine. Onrung. The town behind you doesn't fade. It stays with you not as a haunting, but as a rhythm. The kind you feel in your feet after walking too long on stone. The kind that lingers in your chest like the last note of a hymn. You carry its silence like a folded map. The next village you reach doesn't pretend not to notice you. Here they nod before you introduce yourself. A man in a cap says, "You've come far," as he ties off a bundle of herbs. A woman with gray hair gestures toward the cemetery before you've asked for directions. You haven't said why you're here, but they already know. Mainstream historical fact: in certain Hungarian border villages, it was believed that roles like healer, watchman, or bellkeeper were never assigned, they arrived. Travelers would appear who fit the need, stay just long enough, and then vanish. Towns didn't question it. They simply adapted around the new presence. When the traveler left, they swept the thresholds with salt, thanked the wind, and resumed their lives. This town needs something. You feel it in the way people flinch at dusk. You see it in the bundles of garlic tucked above every window, not for vampires but for reminders, a way of saying, yes, we still believe. Please leave us alone. You don't pry, but that night you hear something. Not a bell, not footsteps. Laughter, coming from the graveyard. And that's wrong. You walk the path with care. The iron gate is rusted open. The gravestones lean slightly like they've been whispering to one another for centuries. But the sound comes from a newer section, stones not yet worn by rain names, still crisp in the granite. The laughter is coming from beneath one. A child's grave, fringe tidbit. In the Czech lands, it was once believed that the spirits of children who died without play would sometimes turn inside out, manifesting not as ghosts, but as echoes of joy that drew others close. If ignored, they'd fade. If acknowledged, they might grow louder until the living were drawn underground. You don't laugh. You kneel. You place the bent nail gently on the stone. The laughter stops, not in fear, in understanding. You don't wait for thanks. You walk back under the stars, and the chapel bells, silent for years, chime once as you pass. You've grown accustomed to towns announcing themselves without words, a flicker in the windows before dusk, a missing floor in an otherwise complete building, a street lamp that never lights no matter how many times the wires are checked. This new place, it's subtle, too neat, too quiet. As if someone swept away, not just dust, but memory. The kind of silence that doesn't ask you to notice, it dares you to. You accept. You walk the perimeter before you enter. 3 laps slow and steady. On the second, you notice there's no cemetery, or at least not one visible. No gates, no stones. Just an empty field where the grass grows in a perfect grid. You don't step inside. Not yet. Mainstream historical fact: in several Moravian villages during the 1800s, burials were done in fields with no markers to deconsecrate them, so the dead could forget who they had been and the living wouldn't be tempted to call their names. These green graves were mowed, tended, and sometimes danced upon to teach the land not to mourn. You suspect you're standing beside one now. You stay at a boarding house run by a woman who never gives her name, only a nod. The room has no mirror, no clock, but a single candle waits on the sill unlit. You don't light it. You let the darkness grow. That night you hear someone in the hallway. Bare feet, light steps. A pause outside your door. And then a soft voice almost singing. The name that's not spoken is the one that still hears. You whisper back, "I know," and the steps retreat. Fringe tidbit. An untranslated folktale from Western Bohemia tells of a visitor who entered a town where nothing could be named. He left a bell at every door, but none rang until someone remembered a grief worth sharing. Only then did the doors open again. The next morning you leave a bell on the table. No string, no twine, just possibility. And when you leave town, the wind smells of rosemary. And something else, relief. You begin to notice that not every place wants to forget. Some towns want to remember, but gently, like holding a cracked plate you no longer eat from, only admire. They don't fear their cemetery. They tend to it. They sweep the stones, burn cedar smoke, place folded notes beneath rocks. The names are spoken here not to summon, but to thank. You arrive in one such town late in the afternoon. No one greets you. No one avoids you. You're just allowed. Mainstream historical fact: in 18th century Transylvania, certain border villages adopted a ritual known as soul walking, where elders walked the entire perimeter of the town just before dusk, whispering the names of the dead as they passed key landmarks. It wasn't mourning. It was maintenance, a spiritual census. You follow one of the elders, silently stepping just behind her worn boots. She speaks names without pause. Some are so old they don't sound like words anymore. Others catch in her throat, not from emotion, but reverence. At the western tree line, she stops and places her hand on the bark. "Your name's not on the list," she says softly. "Not yet," you reply. She doesn't turn around, just nods, continues walking. You spend the night in a house with no corners, everything rounded, softened. Even the walls seem to breathe a little. There's a candle, yes, but this one is already lit. No games, no tricks. You sleep deeply. No dreams, just weightlessness. Fringe tidbit. In a fragment of folklore from northeastern Hungary, homes built with no sharp edges were said to confuse the restless. Spirits unable to find an anchor point or a threshold would wander out again by morning, leaving the living in peace. When you wake, there's bread on the table, still warm, a spoonful of honey beside it. A small bell sits next to the plate, but this one has no clapper at all. Hollow, purely symbolic. You smile. You take the bread. You leave the bell. Not everything needs to be carried. You've learned the difference now. You walk on. No one watches you leave, because they don't need to. They know you'll walk carefully. They know you'll remember. The road feels different now, not like something leading away, but like something coming into focus. The villages are fewer. The distance is longer. The spaces between places begin to carry their own weight, their own kinds of silence. You pass a stone cairn in the woods with no plaque. Just a folded ribbon tucked between two rocks. No red twine, this time blue. Soft. Faded. You touch it gently, and the stone beneath your fingers is warm. Not from sunlight, from memory. You don't stay long. The path pulls you forward. Mainstream historical fact in some Carpathian traditions, waymarkers were erected not to tell travelers where to go, but to remind them they had already passed through once before. Each marker represented a point of reflection. Here you turned. Here you stayed too long. Here you returned differently. You pass 5 more. One has a bent nail wedged into the moss. Another has a child's drawing sealed in wax. The third holds a bell. Unstrung, unsigned, unrung. You carry none of them with you. They are already part of you. You arrive in a hollowed-out town with only 4 standing homes. The rest are moss and rumor. The people who remain speak slowly as if unsure whether the air still holds their language. You don't ask questions. You stay 1 night. In the morning, a boy runs up to you with a wooden box. Inside a map, hand-drawn, old, and at the edge of the paper in small cursive letters, the town that forgot its name. You follow it. Days pass. You dream again, this time of a gate opening inward. Not iron, not stone, wooden, worn smooth from use. Fringe tidbit. One apocryphal legend from Transylvania speaks of a returning place, a town that can only be entered once the traveler has forgotten why they left. It appears only when the feet keep moving, but the heart has gone still. The place is not cursed. It is not blessed. It is just true. You know you're getting close. The air tastes familiar, not like before when the wind carried rules and warnings. This time it carries recognition. Your bell rings once in your pocket. You didn't touch it. It's just saying hello. You crest the final hill just before dusk. Below you lies a valley filled with fog, not the thick, clinging kind, but the gentle sort that hugs the earth like an old blanket. You know this place before your feet reach it. The curves of the roads, the tilt of the trees, the space between lamplight and shadow. It's not a copy of where you began. It is where you began. Or rather, what remains of it. The cemetery wall is still there, though the gate is gone. The fence no longer grows. The stones have settled into soft angles, names dulled by rain. And in the center of it all, a figure waits. Not standing, not watching, just sitting on a bench that wasn't there before. You approach slowly. The figure is you. Not a mirror, not a memory, not another version. Just you, at peace. You sit beside them. There are no words. There don't need to be. Mainstream historical fact in certain early Christian mystic traditions, spiritual wholeness was described not as reunion with the divine, but with the self. The second witness, they called it. To see yourself after the journey. To meet the version of you that kept the promise, carried the bell, honored the silence. You reach into your pocket. The bell is warm. It doesn't ring. It doesn't need to. You place it on the bench between you. The other you nods and walks away. Not into the fog. Not into the graves. Just onward. You stay a moment longer. The chapel nearby is quiet, its door wide open. Inside is a desk. On the desk, a ledger. Blank. Waiting. Fringe tidbit. A buried note found under the altar of a ruined chapel once read, "The story never ends. Only the telling pauses so the next voice may be heard." You step inside. You take the pen. You write, "I was here. I walked gently. I listened. And then you close the book. The bell rings once, and the fog exhales. You walk the cemetery one last time. No path, no map, just memory guiding your steps. The gravestones are quieter now, not in sound, but in feeling. They no longer bristle at your presence. They simply exist. Stones beneath moss. Names half-eaten by time. Markers not of endings, but of pauses. You trace a spiral route slow and deliberate. Not to disturb, to acknowledge. At the center where you once saw a grave open with no name, the ground is whole. Grass has grown. A wildflower leans softly over the spot, small pale blue trembling just slightly in the dusk breeze. You kneel and place your final offering. Not a bell, not a nail, just the ribbon. Unknotted, untied, laid flat on the earth like a hand pressed to someone's shoulder. No magic swells, no echo stirs, but the ground feels satisfied, like it has finally been heard. Mainstream historical fact in early medieval Slavic burial rites, a ribbon left unknotted signified a soul allowed to move freely, not banished, not bound, just released. This wasn't done for the dead's sake, but for the living's. It meant you may stop worrying now. You may continue. You walk back through town if it can still be called that. The houses are mostly shadows now. The windows reflect only sky. No people wave, no animals move, and yet it feels full, present, as though the land has chosen to sleep, not die. You reach the chapel. The ledger is still there. You place one hand upon it, just long enough to say goodbye without saying it. You don't write anything more. You've already written enough. Fringe tidbit. An obscure belief in rural Czech culture says that when a place remembers itself, it no longer requires stewards. The watchers may walk on. Not rejected, retired. The town like a heart keeps beating without being told how. You step onto the road. It doesn't twist. It doesn't double back. It simply leads. And your shadow follows quiet and whole. Just behind you, exactly where it belongs. The road stretches behind you soft with dust, bordered by silence. But it's a different kind of silence now, not the heavy, expectant kind you once feared. This is the silence of pages turned, of stories closed gently, of candles allowed to burn out on their own, not snuffed. You feel lighter, not empty but unburdened, like a bell that's rung its last note still warm from use. The sky above has turned a deep blue, the kind that only appears between day and night when the world exhales. The wind is cool, gentle, constant. Your boots no longer crunch with dread. They simply carry you step after step toward wherever the next story waits. You don't need to look back. You've honored what needed honoring, witnessed what was too quiet for others to hear. You've learned that sometimes the bravest thing a person can do is listen and then leave without trying to fix what was never broken, just misremembered. Ahead, the road vanishes into a gentle curve. You feel no urgency to chase it. You slow down. You breathe deeper. The tension in your shoulders dissolves. Even your shadow walks calmly now, no longer testing boundaries, no longer trying to lead. And somewhere far off a bell rings. But not for you. Not this time. It's someone else's turn. So you keep walking. Quietly. Kindly. With nothing to prove. Because you were there. Because you remembered. Because now the story rests. Let your eyes grow heavier. Let your breathing slow. Let the quiet settle around you like fog in the fields of memory. No need to hold on. You've already come home.